Welcome to step 5 of our process, and we are going to talk about typography and the fonts that you're going to use for your brand. So when we think about your typographic kit, there are different things that you need to define. There's going to be fonts that you use for headings and a font that you use for your paragraph. So when it comes to the heading font, so that's the font that you're going to use for your titles. In some cases, the logo font can work. So depending on the type of font that you used or that you've purchased in the previous step for your logo, you might be able to reuse that for your headings or not. The factor here that's going to help you decide whether you can reuse it or not is it easy to read? You always have to keep in mind readability. It's so much more important for someone to be able to read the text really easily without it hurting their eyes than for the text to look really pretty because you have a fancy font. So readability is the number one key element here when picking your fonts. And then when it comes to your body font, so that's the text that you will use when you write paragraph under titles. Here we really want to use a free, well-known, simple and easy to read font. These fonts are usually Google fonts, and they are the fonts like Arial, Helvetica, Times New Roman, and all these really well-known fonts that you would have seen on magazines online or in books and magazines printed, because they are the fonts that we are the most used to read. And so that's why they're really great for paragraph, because we all are used to it and that's what we expect and what we read the easiest. So to decide what your fonts are going to be, I will show you a tool inside of canva.com that will also help you pair your font and decide on the right combination of font for your brand. But first I want to show you a few key differences between fonts so that you know what we are talking about before we dive into Canva. So there are different families of fonts. Some fonts are called sans serif and some fonts are called serif. Now, what is a serif? Well, if you compare the font on the left to the font on the right, you'll notice that a font on the right has an extra little element to its design, and it's a small line or a small stroke that's attached to the end and the beginning of the letters. And so when you notice those little lines or those little extra stroke to the letters or to the symbol of a particular font, you know that this is a serif font. And the sans serif on the left here is a little bit more minimal because it does not have those little stroke or lines attached to the letters. So that's the difference between sans serif and serif. Now, there is nothing wrong with one or the other. It really is just a choice that designer make and that you will have to make too as to what works best for your brand and what you prefer. But both those options are very common for headings and also for paragraph options. Then we have two more decorative types of fonts. The first one is script and the second one is display. What we call script font are fonts that look like they have been handwritten. So essentially they are trying to pretend that it's been written by a human hand, except of course it's made with a computer. And so these fonts are okay to use for small little accent or here and there in a design, but you wouldn't want to use that for a big paragraph of text because it is really much harder to read. And on the right here we've got the display font. This can be great if you use them here and there, but I wouldn't go and use a full paragraph of text with a display font because, as you can see on the screen, it also is quite hard to read as soon as you have more than a couple of words together. So when picking your fonts, it's essential to keep in mind how readable it is. Having a little bit of fun with your heading font is okay if you want to infuse personality in your brand that way, but never at the detriment of it being easy to read, even when the size of the font is quite small. So for example, always think if this was on a smartphone or on a really small screen, would it be easy to read? So for your body, your paragraph font, pick a simple, well-known font and do not try to use a script or decorative display font because they are too hard to read. And when pairing your heading and body fonts, make sure not to mix too many font families as well. So here are the combinations that I recommend you stick to. Heading serif, body sans serif, heading sans serif, body sans serif, heading serif, body serif, heading sans serif, body serif, heading script or display, body sans serif. Essentially, we don't want to use a display or a script font for your body font because that's too hard to read. It's also okay to use the same serif or sans serif font for both your heading and your body font, often it works well to use the same font, but the heading in uppercase letter, for example, and the body in lowercase. Now let me show you inside of Canva a great tool to help you pair your font and decide which one you're going to use for your brand. So Canva has a great tool called Font Combinations, which is linked in your workbook, that helps you pair your fonts properly. So what it does is ask you to pick a font that you're most interested in using, and then shows you different other fonts that work really well with that one. So for example, if I knew that I wanted to use Montserrat as my main font, it would then recommend to me a body font that works well with it, which is the Droid Serif font. So I would have Montserrat here as the heading and Droid Serif as the paragraph font. And if you click on the arrows to the right and left here, it will show you other combination. So this one here, we have Montserrat this time in the heading and Esteban in the body. And as you can see, those two options had a sans serif font, which is Montserrat, paired with a serif here in the body. And Esteban here is also a serif. And then for more option, it will start showing you the opposite, which is Montserrat, the font that you picked as your body, and a heading that would work really well with it. So in my example, this I think would actually work quite well with the brand that I'm designing for our example. So I'm going to remember that, Bebas New and Montserrat, so that I can add them in my brand kit in the next step. So have a little play around with that. If you want to change the font, you simply click back on Canva font combination here in the top left and pick a different font, and it will offer you even more combinations.